There is something unsettling about winter nights, is there not? The way the snow buries everything, muffling sounds and freezing life itself. Tonight, 3 tales emerge from the cold. A cursed voyage on a merciless sea, a hunting ground where a monstrous predator stalks, and a frozen wilderness that holds secrets far older and far deadlier than man. These are not just stories. They are warnings. So, dear listener, I ask you, are you ready to face what lurks in the winter's silence? Beneath a canopy of blackened skies, and amidst the lamentations of a bitter winter wind, the docks of Dutch Harbor lay in mournful repose. Here, the Golden Venture bobbed in the restless waters, its once proud visage now diminished, as though mourning the sins of its keepers. Brady and Mark Langford, the proprietors of this ill-fated vessel, sat in a dim diner that overlooked the spectral expanse of the harbor. Their visages, etched with the scars of countless battles with the merciless Bering Sea, concealed a deeper corruption, one born not of toil, but of insatiable avarice. The whispers of their misdeeds clung to the air. Among the fraternity of fishermen, the Langford brothers were loathed for their cruelty. Their deckhands, poor wretches consigned to relentless labor, were cheated, degraded, and left to shiver in the icy embrace of unjust servitude. Yet for all their cunning, fortune had begun to elude the brothers. The sea, once their silent accomplice, now mocked their endeavors with empty nets and barren waters. As Brady savored a morsel of pallid fish, the mournful chime of the diner's bell stirred the silence. Through the doorway stepped a figure of peculiar demeanor. He was clad in the garments of a fisherman, long acquainted with the sea's brutality, yet his presence carried with it an air of the uncanny, as though he were more spectre than man. The heavy tread of his boots seemed to echo far beyond the confines of the room, reverberating like the tolling of a shipwreck's bell. Unbidden, the stranger seated himself before the brothers. His voice, rough and resonant, was as the groan of timbers in a storm. "Brady, Mark," he intoned, as though reciting names from an epitaph, "I have heard tell of your tribulations." Brady, his fork paused mid-air, regarded the man with suspicion. "Who are you to speak of our business?" The stranger's lips curled into a smile devoid of mirth. "Call me Finn. I was once a master of the sea, much as you fancy yourselves to be. Yet time has a way of humbling even the proudest of men. Still, I possess knowledge that could lift you from your despair." Mark, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward. And what might that be? Finn's gaze darkened, his eyes glinting like obsidian stones. "A device, a marvel of ingenuity that can lead you to riches beyond measure. Follow its guidance, and the sea shall surrender her treasures unto you. But heed this. There is a limit, a boundary you must not cross. Take no more than 200,000 pounds of crab per haul. Beyond that lies ruin." Brady scoffed, his disdain for caution evident. "And if we do?" The stranger's smile widened, but the light in his eyes grew colder. Then the device could malfunction, causing other problems. The brothers, blinded by desperation, struck a bargain with Finn. As Brady clasped his hand, he recoiled. Finn's nail had pierced his palm, a sharp prick that drew a bead of crimson. The stranger murmured an apology, but when the brothers turned to confer in private, Finn had vanished, leaving behind an air thick with salt and decay. The Golden Venture set forth at dawn, its deckhands bent under the weight of both their burdens and the bitter cold. Finn's device proved to be no idle boast. Each pot retrieved was a cornucopia, spilling forth with crabs so abundant it seemed the sea herself had been bewitched. By the third day, the ship groaned with its bounty, its deck sheathed in a crystalline armor of ice. In the wheelhouse, Brady exulted over their triumph. "Mark, we've struck gold," he declared, his laughter echoing like the mocking cry of a raven. Mark, ever the more cautious of the two, glanced uneasily at the weight monitor. "We're nearing the limit. Perhaps we should call it." Brady's eyes gleamed with greed. "Nonsense. We've never seen a haul like this. A little more, and we'll be legends." Driven by their insatiable hunger, the brothers pushed the crew to the brink, heedless of the freezing wind that cut like a scythe. The monitor's digits climbed past 200,000, yet they pressed on, the siren call of wealth drowning out all caution. At 250,000 pounds, they toasted their conquest, their glasses clinking in the wheelhouse while below, the sea churned with a malevolent hunger of its own. The celebration was short-lived. Without warning, the ship shuddered, its engines silenced by some unseen hand. The lights flickered and died, leaving the vessel adrift in a void of shadow and ice. Brady's curses filled the air as he pounded futilely on the controls. From the depths of the gloom came a sound, a metallic groan, long and mournful, like the wail of a damned soul. Before they could react, a fisherman's hook burst through the co-captain's chair, its cruel point sinking deep into Mark's chest. He gurgled, blood staining his lips as his lifeless body was flung aside. In his place sat Finn, his visage now a mask of spectral malice. "Did I not warn you?" he whispered, his tone as cold as the abyss. Brady, trembling, stammered, What are you?" Finn's laughter was a cacophony of torment, merely a fisherman who despises greed. Brady clawed at the controls, desperate to revive the ship. Finn watched with an air of detached amusement, the wicked curve of his hook gleaming in the dim light. "Sound your alarm," Finn said. "Call for your saviors. It matters not." The emergency alarm wailed, its dirge echoing across the desolate expanse. Finn lectured the terrified Brady as the ship felt more and more unstable against the waves. The Coast Guard finally appeared, their helicopter a beacon of hope in the encroaching doom. One by one, the crew was plucked from the sinking ship, their cries of relief a bitter contrast to the rising waters. But for Brady, there was no deliverance. As he arose from his chair in a futile attempt to be rescued, Finn struck, driving his hook into the captain's leg and pinning him to the chair. The captain must go down with his ship, Finn intoned, his voice a chilling benediction. Finn laughed loudly as he looked into Brady's eyes. The freezing water started to fill the cockpit. Brady's screams mingled with the groans of the ship as it was slowly claimed by the sea. The Montana wilderness stretched vast and unforgiving, its snow-covered expanse glinting coldly under a pale winter sun. Deep within the woods, a secluded cabin stood as the sole bastion of warmth amidst the frozen desolation. It was here that 4 friends, Anna, Rachel, Chloe, and Victoria, sought refuge for their weekend escape. They had planned this girls' trip for months, yearning for laughter and camaraderie, far from the clamor of their everyday lives. The first evening passed in comfort. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth, and the women's laughter echoed through the cabin. They shared stories, sipped wine, and marveled at the pristine beauty of the snow-laden forest, visible through the frost-tinged windows. But as the night deepened, an unsettling silence fell upon the woods, broken only by the faint howl of the wind. A sense of unease crept into their hearts, though none dared voice it. It began with small signs, tracks in the snow, impossibly large and misshapen, circling the cabin. Rachel noticed them the next morning, her breath visible in the frigid air as she crouched to examine the prints. "They're too big for any animal I know," she murmured, her voice tinged with unease. Anna dismissed her concern. "Probably just a bear. Let's not ruin the trip over some tracks." But Rachel's unease lingered, and by nightfall it had infected the others. The second night brought terror. As they sat around the fire, a sharp, inhuman screech pierced the stillness. The women froze, their laughter dying in their throats. Chloe moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "It's nothing," she said, her voice trembling. "Probably just an animal." But her pallor betrayed her words. The screech came again, closer this time. Then came the sound of footsteps, crunching through the snow, heavy and deliberate. The women huddled together, their breaths shallow and fearful. The door rattled violently, as though something immense and primal tested its strength. "We need to stay quiet," Victoria whispered, clutching the fireplace poker like a lifeline. "It'll go away." But it did not. The creature, pale as the snow, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light, stalked them through the night. Its form was indistinct, shifting and unnatural, like something dredged from the depths of a nightmare. When it burst through a window, chaos erupted. The women scattered, their screams echoing through the cabin. The creature moved with horrifying speed, its elongated limbs slicing through the air. It caught Chloe first, its claws rending her flesh with sickening ease. Anna, in a desperate bid to save her friend, swung a heavy iron pan at the creature. The blow connected, and the thing shrieked, retreating momentarily. But Chloe was beyond saving. Rachel and Victoria grabbed Anna, dragging her into a bedroom. They barricaded the door with furniture, their hearts pounding as the creature prowled outside, its guttural growls vibrating through the walls. The minutes stretched into an eternity as they whispered desperate plans. "We have to fight back," Rachel said, her voice trembling but resolute. "If we don't, it'll pick us off one by one." Arming themselves with makeshift weapons, a broken table leg, a kitchen knife, and a shard of glass, they crept from the room. The cabin was eerily silent, the air thick with the stench of blood and something far fouler. They found Chloe's lifeless body near the fireplace, but there was no sign of the creature. It struck again without warning, leaping from the shadows with a feral scream. It slashed at Rachel, its claws tearing into her arm. She cried out, falling to the ground. Victoria and Anna fought valiantly, their blows landing with desperate force. The creature was strong, but it bled, its pale ichor staining the snow as the battle spilled outside. With a final, guttural roar, Rachel thrust the broken table leg into the creature's chest. It howled in agony, its body convulsing before collapsing into the snow. The friends stood over its lifeless form, their breaths ragged and visible in the freezing air. But their victory was hollow. Chloe and Anna were gone, their laughter silenced forever. Rachel and Victoria, bloodied and broken, limped back to the cabin. They burned the creature's body, watching as the flames consumed its unnatural form. As dawn broke, the two survivors sat in silence, the weight of their ordeal pressing heavily upon them. The wilderness, so serene and beautiful just days before, now seemed a cruel and malevolent force, and though the creature was gone, they knew the scars it left, on their bodies and their souls, would never fade. The storm rolled in fast, swallowing the Montana forest in a blizzard of white fury. 4 rescue officers, Harrison, Ortiz, Daniels, and Carter, landed on the outskirts in a whirring helicopter, the blades cutting through the heavy snowfall as they prepared to embark on their grim mission. 3 hikers had been reported missing, their last known coordinates deep in the forest. It was a routine call, or so they told themselves, but the sheer ferocity of the storm set their nerves on edge. The helicopter pilot warned them, "Weather's brutal. Visibility might drop to nothing. You boys and girls better move quick. If you're not back by morning, you're on your own." Harrison, the team leader, nodded, his face grim. "We'll find them. Just keep the engine warm." The forest was a labyrinth of snow-laden trees, their branches bowing under the weight of the storm. Every step felt like trudging through molasses, the wind biting through their thermal gear. Carter, the youngest of the group, tried to lighten the mood. "Reminds me of that Donner Party documentary," she said, her voice muffled by her scarf. "You know, the one where—" "Not the time, Carter," Ortiz snapped, scanning the horizon with a thermal scope. "Let's just focus on finding the hikers." Hours passed, the storm only intensifying. They found the first body near a ravine. It was unrecognizable, torn to pieces as though some enormous predator had descended upon it. Blood stained the snow, dark and frozen, a grim contrast against the white. Daniels bent down, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Bear," he murmured, though the wounds were unlike anything a bear would leave. "Too clean," Harrison said, his voice tight. "And look at the tracks. What the hell is that?" Large, humanoid prints led away from the body, their outlines crisp in the fresh snow. They were too big to belong to any man. The team exchanged uneasy glances, but pressed on. They had a job to do. The second and third bodies were nearby, mutilated in the same grotesque manner. Ortiz found one of the hikers' backpacks, shredded but still intact enough to yield a map and a partially charged phone. The screen flickered to life, revealing the last photo the hikers had taken, a blurry, pale figure standing in the distance, impossibly tall, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "What the hell is that?" Carter whispered, staring at the screen. No one answered. The storm grew fiercer as night fell, the snow flurries thickening into an impenetrable wall. They tried to navigate back to the helicopter, but the GPS kept glitching, and the storm swallowed every landmark. Exhausted and freezing, they stumbled upon a small, crude shelter, a ramshackle cabin, barely more than 4 walls and a roof. "Better than nothing," Harrison said, ushering them inside. The cabin was sparse, with only a rotting table and a few broken chairs. They set up their gear, lighting a small camp stove for warmth. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Carter sat near the door, rifle across her lap, while Ortiz tried to get the radio to work. "We'll bunker down here," Harrison said. "At first light, we head back to the chopper." But first light felt impossibly far away. It came around midnight, announced by a low, guttural growl that froze the blood in their veins. Carter bolted upright, her flashlight sweeping the room. The growl came again, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of something enormous moving outside the cabin. "Everyone armed?" Harrison whispered. The answer was a series of quiet clicks as they chambered rounds into their rifles. The door exploded inward, a shower of splinters as the creature barreled through. It was massive, its form vaguely humanoid but twisted and unnatural. White fur covered its muscular body, and its face was a grotesque hybrid of man and beast, with glowing yellow eyes and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. The stench of decay rolled off it in waves. Carter fired first, the sharp crack of her rifle splitting the air. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, but it barely flinched. With terrifying speed, it lunged at her, its claws raking across her torso. She went down, screaming, blood pooling beneath her as the creature turned its attention to the others. Ortiz opened fire, unloading his rifle into the beast. It staggered, roaring in pain, but didn't stop. One swipe of its massive arm sent him crashing into the wall, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Harrison and Daniels retreated, their shots echoing in the small space. Harrison grabbed a flare gun from his pack and fired, the bright red flare striking the creature in the chest. It howled, the flames licking at its fur, but still it advanced. "Daniels now!" Harrison shouted. Daniels lunged forward, driving a survival knife into the creature's side. It roared again, swiping at him with its claws, but Harrison fired another flare, this time into its face. The creature's shriek was deafening as it stumbled back, its fur ablaze. With a final guttural growl, it collapsed to the floor, its body smoldering. Morning came slowly, the storm finally abating as the first rays of sunlight pierced the forest canopy. Harrison and Daniels emerged from the cabin, battered and bloodied but alive. They trudged back through the snow, their breaths visible in the icy air. Behind them, the creature's charred corpse lay in the ruins of the cabin, its reign of terror finally ended. When they reached the helicopter, the pilot stared at them in disbelief. "Where's the rest of your team?" Harrison didn't answer. He simply climbed into the helicopter, his face pale and haunted. As they lifted off, Daniels glanced back at the forest, now bathed in the soft light of dawn. For a moment, he thought he saw movement among the trees, a flash of white, there and gone. He said nothing. Some things were better left buried in the snow.